Hi, I'm Michael, and as we've been able to learn all these techniques about how to take data, turn it into information, the real goal now is to turn information into knowledge. And when I say the real goal, it doesn't mean that we're not going to spend 90% of our time just doing the low level organization, although we can say with some certainty that some of the drudgery might be taken away through some automated means, which is fine. Pattern recognition, for example, is something that people are convinced that they're really good at, but computers are good at it too because it is, in a way, just looking for similarities, even when those similarities are meaningless. There is a thing that as we get more confident in our skills in relaying information and manipulating it, we do have the other issue of being overconfident. That means that we're putting things together and we're taking the data and we're saying that this has meaning to it. If you have perfect data, okay, this is the thing. If your data is perfect, and there is an example I use. There is an example of almost perfect data, and that is the stock market. The stock market has a fairly robust and accurate set of data about the securities that it has and the pricing and etc. So with that accuracy, they've even been able to build models around that accuracy. So if you look at options markets, those are all built on a way of computing probabilities around pricing that, for the most part, can work all the time. So there's some basic mathematical models that even seem as though it can say something is predictable. However, with all that data, with all of that information in front of you, it is still difficult, if not impossible, to make a decision on whether to buy or sell. So just take it with a grain of salt that the next step of knowledge is actually where we want to put our focus. So to summarize, I'm looking at one thing here, and there is a lot of work to be done in this area, so that's why I'm going to probably introduce it in a few videos, just give you some really spicy, good ideas about what you can do as an information architect. If you, for example, were the greatest information architect ever, you might come up with something like this, the periodic table. I mean, it's unbelievable how simple it looks and yet describes the universe in a very useful way. It also gives you the ability to make all sorts of predictions, and it just is it's a work of art. It's amazing. But how can you improve upon the periodic table? I've got an example right here. So what the periodic table isn't telling you is about how much of these elements are available. And in this case, which ones are used for what. So this is when we get into the idea of using the data to tell a story, using this data to create knowledge, or use the data to just be able to qualify one thing over the other. So we're going to talk about rating systems. We're going to talk about the ability to count things, which we talked about very briefly before, where we said, hey, if you just take this word and add a number to it, you're going to find this to be really helpful. So this idea of adding a weight to a particular topic is, we see it every day. And we started with this idea that, hey, look at how many people have visited my page. Seems at this point to be not all that impressive, which it kind of, all it was is a way of saying like, oh, there's something under the hood here. There's something else going on other than me just looking at something like I go to the library. I'm not going to, maybe I would look at the good old-fashioned card and say, well, how many people have checked out this book? It must be a good book if it has all these people on it. It's long ago and far away. That doesn't really happen anymore. You don't get all that provenance about the popularity of a particular book in the library. But it's still interesting and somewhat valuable because we're going to go to our favorite display now. And I'm just going to go to the for sale area because I kind of spend more time there. So here's for sale. We're going to take a look at bikes. And what happens is you've done an amazing job of coming up with this taxonomy, but now you have to be able to get people around this information. So one and the most critical part of this, even though I will say Craigslist does a terrific job at trying, is sort order. So how do you display things? And what does newest actually mean? Well, newest in this context means that I'm looking at things that may or may not be entered into the system every second of the day. Maybe they are, but that time is interesting for this particular context of for sale. Terrific, right? Now, if I did the same over on Amazon, the time, if I looked for bikes, it's going to actually have a pretty hard time knowing what in the world to show me, because when it was entered into their database isn't probably going to be that interesting to me. It's probably actually irrelevant. So this in this case, it's going to do something. In fact, in this case, as with Google and many others, they figured out, hey, I can sell this top spot, so it's sponsored. Hey, I can promote your product because I don't know what to show people because there's no context yet of what they are looking for other than a bike. But so you can sponsor every sort of top level search. Good business model, and more power to them. It's pretty great idea. However, this very first one here is likely to be a kind of best guess. They might have some things here about selling, what's selling most, nice of them, but they're really kind of throwing this out here, and they're coming up with ways to give you the ability to do less of this, which is over on the side. You can see here, what exactly are you looking for? Is it when it's going to be delivered? No, maybe. Is it a type of bike? Well, I don't know about types of bikes, so you're going to have to explain it to me. So this is another job for you in your taxonomies to understand. We talked about creating these hierarchies. They're really helpful for this reason. And maybe I need to show you all the options of what bikes are. And maybe I could talk about ratings, which is when we get into knowledge, we are literally talking about ratings. So why not start with the rating king is Amazon. So Amazon is using a Likert scale, and I will say and go immediately into my fairly long diatribe about ratings. I was really fascinated, probably inspired by Gary Vaynerchuk, actually. If you've heard of him, you can look him up, Gary's character. But he ran a show called Wine Library TV where he talked about wine, and he rated wines daily, and he did 1,000 shows, of which I probably watched half. I was very excited. It was a very fun learning experience for me to learn about wines. But one thing here you can just see from this particular lovely bit of information architecture, it's showing you that if you have a scale of this sort, it is going to not necessarily translate to another scale. And I'm not going to go through each of these in too much of a detail, other than to say we might talk about a 90-point wine. In this particular scale, it makes sense that there is no reason to go lower. I'm in the academic world. We have a similar idea of grades, that there's A, B, C, D, and F. So 5 points or 5 stars or 5 of something is popular. Makes some sense. If you go into ratings of, for example, I like to go to Pitchfork. Pitchfork has a rating system that is 100, but it's pretty rare that you're really only in 5s. There aren't any 40-point or 4.2 gradations. There's just not that many gradations of what is meaningful when you're ranking something. So they start with this 100-point scale, even though it is not. It's really a 50-point scale. And in this case, it isn't really, because the quality tends to level out. You just don't get, we're talking about here, these words. And I think these words become really part of the information architect's idea. What words are used to describe these numbers? So we're talking about, again, words and numbers together are powerful for computers. They love numbers. They're not so crazy about words, but they can find affinities, and then they can start to use these numbers to be able to weight or rank. Once again, that is how artificial intelligence works. It's just a bunch of numbers against concepts, and it just figures out which one, through trial and error sometimes, which is going to actually answer the question. What I particularly like, and here we go into people who have really given this some thought. Here's 20-point scales. Once again, probably not as interesting below 10. And then you're really looking for superlatives. So for my desert island disc collection, I'm going to be like, there's not that many 5 stars records. Let's just say I'm a purist. Everything is not quite perfect. So when you talk about perfection, you want to use that as a qualifier of your own abilities and taste. And these are all done by people who are trained in these systems. What's interesting is that if I said, hey, this is a 17 wine, or ranked 17 in this Jancis Robinson, who's also a very great wine reviewer and came up with this, most people would be like, huh? What do you mean? 17? What? Oh, you mean 90? 91, 92? See what I mean? It gets into the A, B, C, D, E, F idea. And that's really from a 100-point scale. A's are 90 to 100. It just depends on what you're used to. When we get to these star ratings, this is interesting. Having been in a 5-star hotel just recently, I can say it was pretty nice. Great. But I didn't know that. What does pretty nice mean? It has to do with its relative comparison to the rest of the hotels in that country. And that starts to be interesting, and we'll get there in 1 second about, what is it actually saying about things? Like, how much experience do you have? Have you been to every hotel in this country? Well, sometimes it's a marketing thing. I have 5 stars hotel, and there's some sort of list of criteria that I can follow, and then I can be rated by a outside agency to say, yes, in fact, you have met these criteria, you are 5 stars. It's something to do with academics work like this, as the complexity of teaching is at higher ed is difficult. So there's people that come and make sure they check your syllabus, and they make sure that there's some continuity amongst all the universities, that when you get a degree in X, that it has similar concepts, and those are taught in a way that's good. So let's say they're using this 5-star scale. So this is a 5-star wine. This is, a 5-star hotel. So the decanter, so I'm going to zoom out. We started with them using the 5-star scale for wines. Terrific. So, however, one would expect, since there are a lot of wines, way too many anyway, it's a little tough to understand wines. I will let you know. One would assume you start with 3 stars. However, 3 stars being uninspiring, right? A 3-star wine, however, is what we would probably drink most of the time and probably enjoy most of the time as well. Nothing wrong. Most people are fairly well satisfied with something that's good. As am I. Good is good. Poor is a very strange concept, and we could take this into talking about things like Yelp. And the reason why I'm going into all this is that the human part is why we're here. We're humans, yet we're trying to come up with systems that help humans communicate better with each other. We're also trying to get those into computers so the computers do what they do well, which is sort numerically or do whatever. Something a computer is great at. So if you have a rating on your thing, so we're starting this with the idea of a thing. There's a data set that describes a thing. We've gotten words to describe the thing. We've got structures that allow you to navigate the thing. Now we're talking about the next level. I'll call it metadata. Metadata and knowledge. So knowledge is, to me, social proof. We use that word a lot. It means that someone has endorsed this, that it's the most popular, it's et cetera, et cetera. It's something, knowledge is to sort out the things that aren't as interesting and focus more on the things that we find interesting. It's a weighting system. That means that something is better than another. And how do we do it? Now we're talking about stars. So they're going to offer stars for these wines. Terrific. It's a 5-star wine, might be something that is put on a label and says 5-star wine by Michael Broadbent or Decanter or something like that. And this is true of movies or anything else. We just say, hey, it's a 5-star movie. Honestly, we don't say that too much. But the tomato score right now, that's a score of 100. And that is popular enough. And it does actually seem to have quite the range because it's an interesting scale. We can take a look at it. For my purposes, I am a huge fan of the Michelin restaurant score. The reason why, and if you go zoom out, by the way, you're going to see how it's tried to narrow it. The broader it is, I think the more options there are to be not use. You just won't use under 50, for example. You just are trying to get more range between what is realistic for this. For a movie, for example, movies indeed could be absolutely terrible or really pretty good. So maybe there is reason for having more of a 100-point scale from a 30 rated movie to a 92 rated movie. Terrific. Yeah, I mean, there's, as long as it makes some sense for the topic itself, then you can really try to choose what's best. I'm still going to go with my favorite because it's the most human, is the Michelin star. So out of all the restaurants in the world serving up all sorts of delicious food, most of them are fine or not fine or whatever. In the Michelin star rating system, not having a rating, it does not mean you're not good. That's what's interesting. So right now you've got this sort of empty area here. I go to a restaurant every day. I think it's terrific. It has no Michelin stars. And that is okay because Michelin can come and say, all right, well, we're going to wait and see, or we can actually assess your restaurant and you might make it someday. I think there's some sort of strange part of could be a Michelin star is a thing. However, when you get one Michelin star, the race is on. So this is what's good about the Michelin stars, is just having a star is notable, and it says you're good. One Michelin star is basically you've made it. You are one of the better restaurants, as it says, in this category. So great for you. As you get a Michelin star, that is the universe of this rating system, is trying to find places that have one Michelin star. So you're really, as a consumer using this guide, pretty well off, because all you really need to do is look for any mention at all. Now, when it comes to 2 stars, things get really quite serious. 2 Michelin stars. And because this is a motoring company, they use this idea to say, if there was this great restaurant out in the middle of nowhere, or let's say you needed to travel across town to go eat here, is it worth it? So a 2-star restaurant is worth seeking out. It means like, hey, if you had only one day in this country, go here. 2 stars is laudable. So if we went up to this, we're already 90 is 1 star. I mean, you can see the scale here. It really is like, if you're here, you're worth it. You're good. Now, of course, that means the 3-star restaurants is just the most magnificent, that the world has to offer. And that's great, because those people, that kind of cuisine deserves to be shouted out. So what I like, though, is 3-star ratings. How's that? I think if you had 5 stars, and I've experienced this in my own rating systems and seeing the results, if you have a 10-point system, the average is going to be 7. That's what I said. You tend to throw out the bottom half, and, well, it's going to be 1 and 7. How's that? So people definitely have terrible experiences, and they like to rate it at 1. However, average or forgettable experiences are just that. They're not memorable. So 3 stars is a strange rating. 2 stars is the most odd rating because it's like it was terrible but not quite terrible. Isn't just something that we put a lot of investment in. We love terrible. We're heading toward great, but we tend to be above average. So back to this. Here's our star rating. It's actually going to go ahead and try to come up with some more of a 100-point scale here, or this 4.2. Actually, that would be if 10 in each, that'd be a 50-point scale. So it's got 13 ratings, not many. So there's weighting problems already in this score because you don't have many of them. And as kind of maybe to prove my point, it's always about a 7, meaning it's always pretty good. People tend not to want to engage in ratings unless they feel like there's something either to say, oh, this is pretty good or great. So I bet there's maybe, you've been through this before, obviously. You need to go down and you need to start to read the words. Or you look at a distribution, which is great. Most people are perfectly satisfied. 5 stars means it's good, which is strange. But as we said, we don't know how to teach people how to rate. So, in this case, maybe this is genuine. Hey, this was a great bike. Everyone was completely satisfied. And then some people were not satisfied for one reason or another, which you can probably go in here and say, hey, it arrived late, or that it was mispackaged, or that the bike itself was not a bike, it was a tricycle, and it just is poorly named, etc. As we've gotten more hooked on ratings, we're often using this to sort through our content. And this is where we get to knowledge. Are the ratings useful? Why is this, with 13 ratings at 4 stars, above this, which has 4,000 ratings? So we've got weighting here that is interesting, and many people call this the algorithm. The algorithm is just addition and subtraction of something, right? It is just something that provides a mathematical answer that is either a shortcut or it has some truth to it, meaning, hey, when this changes, it also changes, and these two changes are meaningful enough to use to be able to connect the two. So when we get into the world of algorithms, which we can talk about, it's still just these numbers. It means higher number of ratings and higher amount of some distribution here means for this price, that's what an algorithm is. It's like, hey, at this price level, at this rating level, at this something or other, this might be the way to go.